It was supposed to be just another global summit. World leaders had gathered in Geneva under bright studio lights for a live broadcasted forum titled Africa and the Future of Global Leadership. Cameras rolled, flashbulbs popped. The energy in the room was tense, but controlled. That changed the moment Captain Ibrahim Traoré stepped on stage. Standing tall in his military uniform, Traoré was calm and composed. The audience grew still. Many in the West had only heard his name whispered, the man who speaks for the voiceless. But now, the world was watching him. He began, Africa is not begging. We are rising. Suddenly, boom, a loud voice cut him off. From the side of the stage, Donald Trump marched forward, uninvited. Cameras panned, audience members gasped. No one here wants to hear propaganda, Trump shouted. A sharp silence hit the room. Traoré didn't flinch. He looked at Trump, his eyes steady, unbothered. Everyone held their breath. What would he say? What would he do? And in that silence, something began to shift. The moderators froze. Security hesitated. No one had ever interrupted a global summit speaker like this. Not even Trump had done this before. But Traoré didn't move. He simply raised one hand toward the microphone and said softly but firmly, "Sit down, sir." It wasn't loud, but it echoed. Trump, still walking toward him, stopped mid-step. The audience stared, mouths slightly open. Cameras zoomed in. The words seemed to weigh more than they should, not because of their volume, but because of who said them. Traoré turned back to the crowd. "This is why Africa is not heard," he said, "because even when we speak with dignity, some feel entitled to silence us." Trump chuckled awkwardly, trying to take the mic. "Let's talk facts," he said, but the moderators finally intervened. "Mr. Trump, this is not your slot." Trump waved them off. "I built global leadership." Then, without warning, Traoré stepped aside and said, "Good. Then you'll have no problem standing behind me, where the future waits." The crowd didn't clap. They stood. All of them. Slowly, in silence. Even Trump's own supporters didn't know what to say. It felt like history was being rewritten. Right there, live. That night, one photo went viral. Traoré standing firm, Trump behind him with a strange look, half pride, half disbelief. The caption, "Leadership isn't loud, it's earned." Backstage, the U.S. delegation was furious. "This isn't the time for showmanship," one aide hissed. But deep down, even they knew. Something bigger was happening. What no one saw was what Traoré did after the cameras stopped. He walked down to a young African boy in the front row, maybe 10 years old, sitting quietly with his father, who worked at the embassy. Traoré knelt and handed him the speaking notes he had barely begun. "You'll finish this one day," he said. The boy's eyes welled up. His father, stunned, whispered, "Thank you, sir." Traoré smiled and whispered back, "They tried to interrupt me, but they'll never interrupt you." The moment was quiet. No cameras caught it, but later the boy's father tweeted the story. That tweet would spark a firestorm. Across Africa, across America, across the world. Because this wasn't just a debate. It was about what comes next. And no one, not even Trump, could have seen what was coming. The room stayed quiet long after the confrontation. Leaders from across the globe sat motionless, unsure how to react. Even the cameras didn't know where to turn. Between Trump's rigid expression and Traoré's unshaken poise, every frame was powerful. But it was what Traoré did next that changed everything. He didn't mock Trump. He didn't raise his voice. He turned back to the podium and calmly said, "You can interrupt a man, but not a message." The room listened. His voice steady, he spoke about dignity, about colonial scars still bleeding, and about the silent suffering of African children who are denied clean water while foreign companies drain their soil. Then, his voice cracked slightly. How can we talk about world peace if children in Dori still sleep to the sound of gunfire? That line, that one line. Even a CNN anchor in the control room whispered, "Replay that." Meanwhile, Trump sat, arms folded, silent now, and something unexpected began. A slow clap from a European diplomat. Then another. Then the entire room. Traoré didn't smile. He just nodded once, then said softly, "Let's talk about what matters." After his speech, Captain Traoré stepped off stage, but he didn't return to the VIP lounge. Instead, he walked to a small green room, where his personal aide handed him something wrapped in cloth. A letter, yellowed, folded, written decades ago. It was from Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's revolutionary hero, written in 1986 but never delivered. It had recently resurfaced in Ouagadougou. The words inside were chillingly relevant. If Africa does not find its voice, it will remain a continent spoken about, never for. Traoré stood still, absorbing the message. He knew this summit wasn't just about Trump's outburst. It was about something bigger. A line in history. Suddenly his aide whispered, "The African Union just messaged. They want to talk, privately." Meanwhile, Trump was backstage, visibly shaken. One of his aides whispered, "Sir, the audience turned on us." He didn't reply. His eyes were locked on a nearby screen showing Traoré's final words. "Let's talk about what matters." For the first time in years, Trump had no comeback, and on Twitter, something was happening. Traoré the Voice was trending in 42 countries. As Traoré left the green room, a journalist from Kenya approached him in tears. "I need to show you something," she said, unlocking her phone. It was a video from Djibo, a northern town in Burkina Faso, often ignored by the world. In the video, a little girl, barefoot, no older than 6, was standing beside a collapsed water well. She looked straight into the camera and said in broken French, "We know no one hears us, but maybe one day Captain Traoré will." Traoré froze. His voice softened. "What's her name?" he asked. "Fatima." That night on international television, Traoré did something that stunned the world. During a follow-up panel, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a printed photo of Fatima. Holding it up, he said, "I want the world to look at her. This is what leadership means to me. If you care more about stage time than children like Fatima, then leadership is not your calling." The crowd was speechless. Trump, seated 2 chairs down, turned his face away. And Fatima's name? It would be on every headline the next morning. She had become the symbol of truth. And Traoré, the symbol of hope. That evening, the summit's after panel resumed with tight security. Former President Trump returned to the stage, but this time with a prepared speech. Traoré stood beside him, arms folded, quiet but strong. Trump began, "I may not agree with everything Captain Traoré says, but we can agree that suffering children deserve better." Some clapped. Others remained still. Then Trump turned to Traoré and added, "But leadership isn't about dramatic moments or viral clips. It's about power." That's when Traoré stepped forward calmly and said, "If power means ignoring starving children, I want no part in it." There was a pause. Then Traoré lifted something from his folder, a map of Burkina Faso, marked with red dots. "These are places where children die before age 5 because they drink water from poisoned wells." He pointed to the camera. "I want the world to see this. Not me. This." His voice cracked slightly. "If we don't fix this, we are not leaders. We are spectators to suffering." Backstage, a cameraman whispered, "I've never seen anything like this." And in Fatima's village, they were watching. Even she didn't blink. In the dry, sun-cracked town of Djibo, the little girl named Fatima sat with her grandmother under a flickering satellite-powered TV. When Traoré said her name on the broadcast, she gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. "He said me," she whispered. Traoré had shared her video with the entire world. It was now playing across networks in France, South Africa, Brazil, and even the US. That night, people in cities thousands of miles away wept for a child they had never met. In Washington, a journalist posted, "I came to cover a political summit. I left questioning my heart." But something even bigger was happening. A tech billionaire, moved by Fatima's clip, tweeted, "Someone get me a contact for Captain Traoré. I want to fund 100 wells across northern Burkina Faso." It went viral. Meanwhile, backstage, Traoré received a handwritten note from the girl's grandmother delivered by a diplomat. "You gave a voice to the silent. Thank you, son." He read it alone, then quietly wiped his eyes. At 2 a.m., Traoré's phone rang in his hotel room. It was a private number. On the other end, a soft voice said, "Captain, this is the Secretary General of the United Nations. Can we meet before sunrise?" Traoré agreed. An hour later, seated in a quiet, glass-walled conference room, the Secretary General looked across at him with tired but serious eyes. "Your message has moved more people in 12 hours than some governments have in 12 years. Then he leaned forward. "We want you to co-chair a new humanitarian alliance, not just for Burkina Faso, for Africa." Traoré said nothing at first. He looked down at a worn bracelet on his wrist, a gift from a mother whose son had died from malaria due to lack of medicine. Then he asked, "Will this be another empty meeting with rich men and fake promises?" "No," the Secretary General replied, "because this time, the world is already listening." Outside the building, a small group of children had gathered, holding up handwritten signs. One read, "Thank you for seeing us." And for the first time in hours, Captain Traoré smiled. But the story wasn't done. It was only beginning. The hotel hallway was silent. Captain Traoré had just returned from his early morning meeting with the UN when his assistant rushed toward him, pale and breathless. She handed him a phone, whispering, "It's urgent. From Djibo." On the other end was a trembling voice, Fatima's grandmother. "Captain, Fatima collapsed this morning. Her breathing was weak. We tried. We gave her everything. But..." The line fell silent. Then came the words that shattered his soul. "She's gone." For a moment time stood still. Traoré, the warrior, the commander, the voice for the voiceless, lowered himself into a chair. He covered his face and wept. The girl whose photo had touched the world, the symbol of his entire fight, was gone. No cameras, no crowd, just grief. He didn't speak for hours. Outside the summit building, world leaders were arriving for the next panel. Reporters gathered asking for comments. But inside, a man of steel was breaking quietly. And that's when his assistant whispered, "Captain, they want you to speak. Everyone's watching." He stood. He wiped his eyes, and he said, "If I speak now, it will be for Fatima." The auditorium was packed. Millions were watching live. On the main stage there were 3 chairs, but Traoré asked for a 4th one to be placed at the center, empty. The moderator looked confused. "Who is this chair for?" he asked. Traoré walked slowly to the microphone, his voice calm, but loaded with grief. "This chair is for a girl named Fatima. She died this morning. A child who never saw a doctor. A child who drank poisoned water. A child whose only dream was to grow tall enough to fetch water on her own." The audience froze. He continued, "While we argue about numbers, Fatima was gasping for air. While we negotiate deals, children like her die in silence. That silence ends today." His eyes scanned the room. This chair will stay here as long as I speak. Let the world remember what happens when we turn away." Suddenly, a senior official from another country stood up and said, "Captain, we will fund 10 clinics in her name." Another followed, "And 20 wells." And another, "We will send medicine." And just like that, a wave began. But what happened next was even more unexpected. Traoré asked for the microphone to be cut. A technician hesitated. "Sir, the microphone? The cameras are live." Traoré nodded. "Turn them off, please." The screen faded to black. But the room, full of presidents, prime ministers, CEOs, and generals, remained frozen in anticipation. Then Traoré did something they would never forget. He stepped off the stage, walked to the empty chair, sat down beside it, and began to speak, not as a leader, but as a father. "Do you know what Fatima wanted most? Not money, not toys, just to go to school, without walking 6 miles barefoot, that's all." The room was quiet enough to hear tears fall. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small drawing, Fatima's, a stick figure holding a cup of clean water. He passed it around the room. One by one, these powerful men and women held it in their hands and began to cry. "You want to honor her," Traoré whispered. "Don't name buildings, don't take pictures, just do something real." Outside the room, staff, journalists, and security waited. They didn't know what was said. But hours later, something happened that had never happened before at a summit. No one wanted to leave. 2 days after the closed-door meeting, the summit ended quietly. No speeches, no applause, just silence and red eyes. As Traoré returned to his hotel, his assistant handed him a simple envelope. "Sir, this came from a village school in Kaya." He opened it. Inside was a folded, dusty piece of paper, clearly written by a child. "Dear Captain Traoré, we heard about Fatima. We all cried. But we want you to know, we will not stop learning. We will not stop hoping. We will be strong, just like her, just like you." There were 24 names written in crayons, boys and girls, orphans, children whose parents died fighting terrorism, kids who still shared books 3 to a desk. Traoré closed his eyes. The grief was still fresh. But this was strength. He walked out onto the hotel balcony facing the city lights. Somewhere out there, people were still arguing about policies, profit, and politics. But for the children of Kaya, a seed had been planted, and Captain Traoré was already planning his next move. Not for applause, not for power, but for those names written in crayon. 3 weeks later, Traoré returned to Burkina Faso. The moment his plane landed, the airport was flooded, not with politicians, but with farmers, nurses, teachers, and children. They clapped, cried, and lifted signs that read, "For Fatima, for our future." One sign stood out. "We watched, we believed, we acted." But inside the presidential car, Traoré's phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, Washington, D.C. A staffer nervously handed him the device. "Sir, it's from the White House." Traoré answered. It wasn't a secretary. It wasn't an assistant. It was Donald Trump himself. His voice, for once, was soft. "Captain, what happened back there? It changed minds. Even mine. I don't agree with everything you say. But I watched that empty chair, and my granddaughter asked me why a girl had to die just for water." Silence. Then Trump continued. "So I signed a bill, quietly. You probably won't hear about it. But funding will go to clean water programs in West Africa, yours included." Traoré didn't say thank you. He simply said, "Then make sure it reaches the ground, not the pockets." Trump chuckled. "You don't play politics." Traoré replied, "I don't play at all." 1 month later, a new well opened in the village where Fatima once lived. But Traoré didn't invite cameras. He invited only her grandmother and the children. They gathered quietly under a small tree. No podium, no ribbon, just a flagpole. The village elders handed him a folded Burkinabe flag. For her, for the girl who shook the world. As the wind picked up, Traoré knelt and let one of the youngest boys raise the flag. It waved gently, bright, proud, free. And beneath it, carved in stone, were the words, "Fatima, she gave us water." The children clapped softly. Some cried, and for the first time in weeks, Traoré smiled. This, not the summit, not the politics, was the moment the world truly changed. No tweets, no press release, just a flag, a well, a girl. That night, back in the capital, a journalist asked Traoré, "Will this be the legacy you leave behind?" He paused. "No," he said. "This is the beginning." It was supposed to be a short interview, just 10 minutes with an African news station. But the footage went viral before the sun rose. The interviewer, a woman in her late 40s, tried to stay composed, but her voice trembled. "Captain, there's something I never told anyone. My sister died during the famine of 2007. We were just children. And I gave her my last biscuit and said, 'You'll be fine in the morning.' She didn't wake up." She wiped her eyes. "But when I saw how you spoke about Fatima, it was like watching someone speak for all of us." Traoré didn't interrupt. He simply took off his military jacket and folded it. He handed it to her. "For your sister," he said softly, "and for every child the world didn't hear in time." The studio fell silent. The next morning, that clip had 87 million views. People weren't just watching, they were weeping. And everywhere, from Accra to Alaska, one question echoed. Why did this leader hurt so deeply for a girl who wasn't even his daughter? And another answered, because that's what true leaders do. Months passed. The summit faded. The news cycle moved on. But in Burkina Faso, something was changing. In schools, kids began asking for Fatima's story in their history books. Hospitals posted her photo by clean water stations. And one afternoon, in a quiet village clinic, Traoré stood for the ribbon cutting of a solar-powered maternity ward. As the ribbon was cut, a little girl ran up to him, about 6 years old in a white cotton dress holding flowers. She looked nervous. "Captain, my name is also Fatima." Traoré knelt. "That's a beautiful name." She smiled. "My mama said I was born the day the well opened. She said it means I was born with water." Traoré's lips trembled. His eyes watered. He held her hand. That moment, captured by a passerby, became the most shared image in Burkina Faso's online history. No words, just a powerful leader, overwhelmed by a child's innocent truth. And that night, when the stars were out and the lights of the village flickered, Traoré sat alone and whispered, "She didn't die in vain. Not anymore." Exactly 1 year after the summit, Captain Traoré was invited back. But this time, not as a speaker, as a keynote guest of honor. Every seat was filled. Presidents, prime ministers, celebrities, survivors, children. The lights dimmed. A video played. Fatima's story. The well, the school, the summit, the silence, the tears, the hope. Then came Traoré. No bodyguards, no script, just truth. "When I stood here last year, I came with pain in my heart. I wanted to shout, to fight. But I realized the world doesn't change from shouting. It changes when hearts break, and people rise from the pieces." He looked out at the crowd, voice steady. Fatima was one of millions. She deserved more. They all do. And today, because of her, a little girl was born with water. Standing ovation, tears, and then silence. As he walked off stage, the world knew. A moment became a movement, and a girl no one knew had changed history. If this story moved you, if it made you pause, if even one tear fell, like this video to honor Fatima and all children who deserve better. Comment. We remember Fatima below so her name echoes through history. And if you believe the world needs more leaders like Ibrahim Traoré, subscribe right now. Let's build a powerful community of people who feel, think, and take action. Because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't fiction. They're real. And they change the world.